It's 3 in the morning in Pittsburgh's Strip District, and a truck driver has nowhere to sit. He's hauled produce up Smallman Street along the Allegheny River all night. He has maybe 10 minutes before the next load moves. No table, no fork, no time. So, he walks into a sandwich cart on 18th Street, and the man behind the counter piles grilled meat onto Italian bread, then adds coleslaw directly on top, and then the French fries. Right on the sandwich, not beside it, on it. The fries go inside. Here's the strange part. This wasn't a novelty. No one was trying to be clever. The year was 1933. Pittsburgh was still what many called the steel capital of the world, and the men keeping it running ate wherever they could, as fast as they could, with whatever hand was free. The Primanti brothers sandwich is an engineering solution. Meat, starch, vegetable, bread, a complete meal, one-handed, eaten in a truck cab on a winter night. But why Pittsburgh? And why did a potato delivery on a cold day become the moment that defined what this city eats? The answer reaches back through river commerce, immigrant labor, and one of the most violent industrial histories in America. To understand what that Strip District cart was solving, you have to understand what Pittsburgh actually was. Pittsburgh sits where the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers meet to form the Ohio River. 3 rivers, every direction a waterway. When the United States industrialized in the mid-1800s, that junction made Pittsburgh the natural routing hub between the Atlantic coast and the Midwest. Iron ore from the Lake Superior region, coal from the surrounding Appalachian Hills, limestone from local quarries. Andrew Carnegie began steel production here in 1875. By 1910, Pittsburgh was producing between 1/3 and 1/2 of all the steel made in the United States. By 1911, that figure had climbed to closer to half the nation's entire output. The city's population swelled to more than 500,000 people. That scale required logistics. The Strip District, a half-square-mile wedge pressed between the Allegheny River and the city's business district, became the wholesale corridor that fed the whole machine. Before the produce merchants arrived, this same strip of riverfront land had housed the Fort Pitt Foundry, which cast the large cannons used in the Civil War. Produce merchants, meat dealers, and poultry houses packed along Smallman Street and Penn Avenue. By the 1920s, historians described the Strip District as the economic center of Pittsburgh. In practice, produce trucks arrived before dawn. Shift workers unloaded freight in the middle of the night. The district never slept because the mills never slept. You needed restaurants that didn't sleep. And when Joe Primanti set up his sandwich cart at the corner of Smallman and 18th Street in 1933, he was threading himself into an ecosystem of labor that had been running for decades. The geography made the city made the labor. But the man who answered that labor came from somewhere else entirely. Joe Primanti was born in Wilmerding, Pennsylvania, a mill town southeast of Pittsburgh. His story is inseparable from one of the greatest surges of mass migration in modern history. Between 1880 and 1914, 4 million Italians left for the United States. Most came from southern Italy, agricultural communities broken by foreign rule and persistent poverty. They arrived into the padrone system, Italian labor contractors who found industrial jobs for new immigrants, controlled their transportation, managed their wages, and extracted fees from every step. Workers got the job. The padrone took a cut of everything. Pennsylvania drew many of these immigrants. The state's manufacturing industries needed manual labor in vast quantities: railroads, sewers, bridges, early skyscrapers. Italian male immigrants filled those roles. The housing was overcrowded. Tuberculosis was constant. But it was work, and Pennsylvania's industrial corridor needed all of it. Pittsburgh's labor history was already violent before any of them arrived. In 1877, railway workers protesting wage cuts touched off what historians record as the most violent urban labor uprising the city had seen. 40 men killed, most of them strikers, 100 train engines, and more than 1,000 rail cars burned. That confrontation shaped Pittsburgh's understanding of labor as something worth fighting over, and it drew union organizers, labor priests, and political activists into the Strip District's orbit for generations. By 1933, Pittsburgh's workforce was a layered mosaic. Italian immigrants had settled alongside Polish families anchored by St. Stanislaus Kostka Church, built in 1891 in Polish cathedral style, one of the city's oldest and most visible immigrant landmarks. Slovak workers filled the mill neighborhoods. African American workers had come north during the Great Migration from the rural South, drawn by the same industrial jobs that had attracted European immigrants a generation earlier. These communities didn't just work together, they ate together, or at least ate alongside each other in the same streets. Slavic immigrants had introduced pierogies to Pittsburgh's food culture. Isa Lee's dairy chain was already serving Pittsburgh its chipped ham by 1933, the same year Primanti's opened. Multiple food traditions were landing in the same compressed geography at the same compressed moment. Then the Depression squeezed all of it. U.S. Steel, created in 1901 when J.P. Morgan merged Carnegie's company with two competitors for $492 million, had become the world's first billion-dollar corporation, capitalized at $1.4 billion. In its first full year of operation, 1902, it produced 67% of all steel made in the United States. And it was not immune to 1929. The men who had built that infrastructure were suddenly looking for any corner where someone would trade them a meal. Into this world, the Strip District in 1933, still churning with overnight freight despite the Depression's grip, Joe Primanti opened his cart. The wholesale hub at Smallman and 18th Street was the right place. People with truck cabs and no time needed something to eat. Strong sales let him open a storefront that same year. The workers came, the truckers came, and then someone drove in with a load of frozen potatoes. Here's the receipt. Joe Primanti's nephew, John D. Preter, gave this account of how the fries ended up inside. One winter, someone drove up with a load of potatoes. He brought them over to the restaurant to see if they were frozen. I fried the potatoes on our grill and they looked pretty good. A few customers asked for them, so I tossed them on the sandwich. That's it. A frozen produce shipment, a test fry, a few requests. The fries stayed because of what they did for the customer. In 1933, federal regulations governing how long a truck driver could work did not exist. The first hours of service rules for commercial drivers weren't enacted until October 1938, 5 years after Primanti's opened. Before that date, drivers worked as long as they needed to, ate whenever and wherever they could. By 1920, there were already more than 1 million trucks on American roads. By 1933, every state had some form of truck weight regulation, but the human body inside the cab was unprotected. Drive as long as you can. Eat with one hand. Keep moving. The Primanti Brothers sandwich answered that arithmetic directly. Meat, coleslaw, tomato, provolone, and French fries, all inside the bread, wrapped in paper. One hand, no plate, no delay. The official account is plain about it. The design was created to allow drivers to eat one-handed rather than stopping at a deli counter. In Depression economics, the efficiency of the meal was also financial. Italian bread, dense, substantial, could hold real weight. The coleslaw added vegetable, the fries added starch. Nothing was superfluous. The sandwich wasn't assembled for any one customer's preference. It was assembled for a class of customer, the overnight laborer, the produce haul trucker, the man who had no time for a plate and no money for 2 meals. When you eat one of these sandwiches today, you are eating the logic of a 1933 economy, solved in bread. Primanti built what the workers needed, and the demand for that kind of fuel was about to grow in ways no one in the Strip District could have anticipated because Pittsburgh was about to go to war. During World War II, Pittsburgh's steel mills operated around the clock. Area mills produced 95 million tons of steel for the war effort, enough to build warships, tanks, rail lines, and the physical infrastructure of an Allied victory. The city that Andrew Carnegie built in 1875 became, by 1943, what historians call the arsenal of democracy. At peak employment in 1943, U.S. Steel alone had more than 340,000 workers on its payroll. Primanti fed the city at 3 in the morning because the city was working at 3 in the morning. Then the industry ended. By the early 1980s, the steel industry collapsed in a wave of national restructuring. Plants that had operated for a century shut down. The city that had peaked at 680,000 residents in 1950 shrank dramatically. Stanley Primanti died in the early 1970s. His brother John died in 1974. Dick Primanti sold the business to Jim Trinos in 1975. The restaurant survived the transition. It survived deindustrialization. It survived the collapse of the very industry it had been built to feed. The workers were gone. The sandwich stayed. In 2007, the James Beard Foundation named Primanti Brothers one of America's classics, recognition of regional restaurants with timeless appeal. It is the kind of award that says, this place is doing something that cannot be replicated anywhere else, and it has been doing it long enough that everyone has finally noticed. In 1933, you ate at Primanti's because you had 10 minutes and a truck to turn around. Today you eat there because you want to understand something about Pittsburgh, its labor history, its immigrant roots, its compulsive practicality. The sandwich hasn't changed. The reason you eat it has. That truck driver at 3 in the morning in 1933, the one with no table and no time, he didn't ask for something beautiful. He asked for something that worked, and what he got was a city's identity in 2 slices of bread. Pittsburgh still has 446 bridges. The Strip District is still there, though the produce wholesalers are gone and the mills have been quiet for 40 years. A restaurant on 18th Street serves a sandwich never meant to be iconic. It was designed to be eaten in a truck cab. The mills created the workers created the demand, and the demand created the sandwich. When the mills closed, the sandwich didn't disappear. It became the monument the city built to the people who built it, not in marble, but in Italian bread and fried potatoes. The fries are still inside. Here's the question. When Pittsburghers line up for this sandwich today, are they celebrating what the Steel City was? Or holding on because letting go feels like losing the workers twice?